Before the crowbar was invented, crows simply drank at home. The movie begins with a loud gunshot, followed by a man running. He hides behind a pillar while bullets zoom past him. Fighting back, he manages to shoot one of his attackers. As he tries to get away, he frantically contacts his getaway driver. The driver tells him he'll arrive shortly. While he's running, the man accidentally gets hit by a car. The police arrive, making his getaway driver leave quickly. Then we meet Paul, a regular guy living with his expectant wife Taryn. She's excited about their baby's arrival and for Paul to finish preparing the nursery. The news mentions a new sad event. District Attorney Joshua Gregory is the latest casualty in a string of assaults on high-profile people. Meanwhile, Paul's phone rings, signaling the start of his workday. When he gets to the hospital, we see he's a committed nurse, prepared for another day of helping patients. At the crime site, Detective Eric Masterson examines the area, trying to understand what happened. Lieutenant Reginald Lewis joins him, sharing that she was the first one on the scene and tried her best to help. Masterson tries to reassure Lewis by telling her Joshua wasn't completely unprotected. He shot at one of the attackers. During their talk, Detective Jones adds that 2 people with gunshot wounds were recently admitted to local hospitals. With this news, the team gets moving to follow this clue. In the hospital, Abe is seriously injured with a concussion and is out cold. Paul notices the window open and a man jumps in and starts attacking him. The intruder snatches Paul's ID card and escapes. Soon after, Paul gives a statement to Lewis, and they chat briefly before she gives him her contact card. Janet, the manager, tells Paul to take the rest of the night off, so he goes home. He explains what happened to his wife, who becomes slightly alarmed. As Paul goes to the bathroom, he is suddenly hit from behind. The attacker also hits his wife before coming back to knock Paul unconscious. Later, Paul regains consciousness when his phone rings, and he hears his wife's terrified screams and sobs. The guy on the phone tells Paul that he's gotten himself involved. He instructs Paul to return to the hospital and get his brother out without talking to anyone, or his wife will be in danger. Paul quickly heads to the hospital, glancing at the card Lewis gave him. He receives a message instructing him to call back once he leaves. Overwhelmed, Paul feels dizzy in the bathroom, but he pushes himself to act. He takes Janet's card and starts filling a bag with various medicines. He leaves calmly and enters Abe's room, noticing a cop guarding the patient. Paul convinces the officer that Abe needs to be taken to the imaging department downstairs, and the officer agrees to accompany them. As they wheel Abe down the hallway, the 2 detectives enter the hospital. In the elevator, Paul heads to the 3rd underground level while the cop is distracted by his phone. The detectives discuss Abe and his brother, street mercenaries, who work for someone called Big D and supposedly owe him money. Meanwhile, in the elevator, Paul disconnects a cable, pretending Abe's heart has stopped. The officer reaches for a defibrillator, but Paul uses it to shock him instead. The detectives find Abe's room empty. Paul administers adrenaline to Abe, waking him up, followed by morphine. The detectives notice on the cameras that Paul has Abe. Paul and Abe leave the elevator and start running, with the detectives following. They rush up the stairs and narrowly escape through a gate. When they encounter Jones, Abe accelerates and they manage to get past him. Paul shares with Abe the threat to his wife and unborn child. Abe, upset, calls his brother. They arrange a meeting point, and Abe insists his brother not harm Paul's wife or child. Paul talks briefly to his wife on the phone before the brother, Mateo, reveals his identity. It turns out the brothers are being pressured by Big D. Paul's wife, feigning tiredness, uses the opportunity to elbow Mateo and tries to escape. Mateo, gun in hand, warns her not to mess around or she'll be in danger. The other pair heads to a place frequented by homeless people where Paul looks at Lewis' card. Meanwhile, Lewis inquires about the link between the 2 brothers and the DA's office. Masterson explains that Mateo faced a 10-year jail term, but Abe had offered the now-deceased Joshua a drive containing evidence against corrupt police officers. Returning to a tense Paul, Abe advises him to sell his car and tells him to go home. However, Paul disagrees and pursues Abe. He fires a shot near Abe, insisting that Abe accompany him. Abe initially refuses but agrees when he realizes he needs a doctor to prevent collapsing. They head to a station where the brothers plan to meet. Abe warns Mateo of a trap, but communication issues lead Abe to create a diversion. Taryn tries to escape but gets caught by Mateo. The police spot them and chase ensues. Taryn screams as they dodge cars and speed away. Mateo's driving causes 2 police cars to crash, allowing them to escape. Paul and Abe also escape, with Abe needing another dose of morphine. Suddenly, Paul is attacked, but Abe overpowers the attacker in a car wash and takes his radio and police badge, indicating trouble. They're forced to take a car from an elderly woman, and the detectives are quickly notified. The police try to set traps to stop them without success, but they end up facing the detectives. Paul accelerates the car, following Abe's directions. They abruptly stop, creating a blockade, and flee on foot. Paul decides to head to Pop's, a friend's place, to hide and escape. Elsewhere, Mateo apologizes to Taryn for involving her, but she expresses concern for herself and her unborn child. Despite her pleas, Mateo doesn't let her go and shares the story of how he and his brother have been on their own since childhood. Mateo enters a hidden factory, unaware he's being followed. Meanwhile, Abe and Paul discuss how Pops was one of Paul's former clients whom he had saved. At the factory, Mateo tells Taryn she can leave once Abe arrives. He stashes the duffel bag he received from his brother and gets another displeasing message from Big D. Abe and Paul get the go-ahead from Pops and head to a man known as Big Cheetah. Abe approaches Cheetah for a favor, but Cheetah denies having any favors to give. As they converse, Paul charges his phone and receives a call from Mateo. He answers just as Abe is given car keys. Abe then sees Paul on the phone and points a gun at him until he talks to his brother. A warning message arrives, and Abe, holding Paul at gunpoint, tells Paul that this could cause his wife's death. At the same time, the day's stress triggers Taryn's labor. Concurrently, the detectives and another officer raid a pawn shop. Gunfire ensues and Paul is cornered by Masterson. Lewis shoots Cheetah and brutally attacks an unarmed Abe, demanding the drive. Not finding it, she grabs Abe's pistol, threatening him and questioning if she'll stage this like Joshua's murder. Masterson realizes Lewis is corrupt, responsible for Joshua's death and framing Abe. Lewis shoots Masterson and prepares a cover story with Jones while stalling the arriving police. Just as Jones is about to execute Abe, Paul intervenes, shooting him repeatedly. Despite being in shock, Paul and Abe manage to flee. Lewis, finding Jones dead, realizes the gravity of her situation. At the factory, Mateo gently lays Taryn down, who insists on needing a hospital for childbirth. Mateo agrees but wants to inform his brother first. As he leaves, he's shot. A large assailant then starts attacking him while Taryn takes cover. Mateo fiercely attacks the man, but as he becomes overwhelmed, Taryn attempts to assist but ends up held at gunpoint. The assailant then shoots Mateo. The scene shifts to Paul, who is losing his composure. Abe tries to calm him, but Paul is struggling with the fact that he just shot a police officer. Shortly after, they reach the factory and discover a trail of blood, leading them to a gravely injured Mateo. As a nurse, Paul do what they can to aid him. Mateo reveals his wife has been taken, and Paul acknowledges Mateo's severe blood loss. While Mateo struggles to breathe, Abe comforts him as much as possible until Mateo passes away. Paul observes this, realizing the brothers were just kids trying to survive the harsh streets together. Meanwhile, the thug who kidnapped Taryn meets with Lewis, revealing he's a corrupt cop. Lewis instructs him to destroy all evidence from the pawn shop and to bring Taryn inside. Back with Paul and Abe, Paul stitches up a wound Abe got during the police chase and mentions he and his wife are expecting a baby boy. Abe retrieves the duffel bag with the drive and his gun, ready to take down every corrupt officer. Despite Paul's attempts to dissuade him, Abe insists it's the only way to save his wife. Paul suggests retrieving the tape from the pawn shop to incriminate Lewis. In the warehouse, Taryn is brought in, and Lewis claims that Paul is responsible for her partner's death and vows revenge. Abe and Paul arrive at a trap house, seeking Big D. Expecting large figure emerges, but he's not as imposing as expected. He confronts Abe for showing up, while his men are hunting him. Abe offers the cash from the bag, but Big D deems it insufficient and orders his men to attack. However, upon opening a flash drive, the men become intimidated, realizing their overreaction. Abe reveals that the drive contains names, addresses, secret bank accounts, and passwords of corrupt cops, which pleases Big D. He welcomes Abe and Paul inside. Meanwhile, Lewis and her accomplice are erasing evidence at the pawn shop. Lewis, looking at Taryn, decides to contact Paul. She informs him bluntly that his wife is in labor and may not survive long. She provides him with coordinates and an hour to arrive. Big D shares with Abe and Paul that his insider has informed him that Paul's wife is being held in a drug trafficker's building. Curious about the whole story, Big D listens as Abe recounts how his brother faced a decade in prison and he negotiated a deal. The drive in exchange for his brother's freedom, requiring a personal handover. Abe recalls finding Joshua dead and barely escaping through a window. The duo is then equipped with police uniforms, with Big D claiming they're now deputized. He and his men set out, with Big D behaving as if directing a movie. Paul notifies Lewis of his arrival at the given location. Big D initiates a scene where a car is pushed down the street, set on fire with a Molotov cocktail, and collides with a police car, causing an explosion near a police station. Paul calls 911 to report the fire, drawing police to the scene. Big D instructs one of his men to film the money shot. As Lewis arrives at the fiery scene, an ambulance also approaches, signaling the moment for Paul and Abe to act. Amidst the chaos, Taryn's water breaks while she is hiding in the building. Using the commotion as cover, Paul and a feigned injured Abe sneak into the police station. They navigate the corridors, while Taryn is discovered and roughly handled by the corrupt cop. Lewis enters the police station, but is quickly confronted by Abe, who holds her at gunpoint and disarms her. Meanwhile, Paul rushes towards the sound of his wife's screams and tackles the corrupt cop. A fierce fight ensues, with Paul initially struggling, but he eventually manages to stab the cop with a syringe. He then hurries to his wife, while Abe forces Lewis to the ground. Lewis rants about the extent of the corruption, unaware that Abe had secretly recorded her in her office, which leaves her realizing the severity of her situation. As she continues to rant, Abe silences her with a forceful kick. Outside, Big D's associate announces he's captured the crucial footage, marking the end of his involvement. Nearby, news reporters cover the scene. Abe approaches one of them, handing over the hidden camera and finally allowing himself a moment of relief and a smile. Back inside, Taryn is in the midst of childbirth. Lewis regains consciousness, sees her own face on the news broadcast, and notices a gun nearby. As she reaches for the gun, police officers swarm the room. She attempts to fire, but is shot down by the officers. Fast forward 1 year, and Paul is enjoying a playful moment with his son, celebrating the child's first birthday. They bring out the birthday cake, and Paul receives a touching message from Abe. The family of 3 poses for a photo together. The scene shifts to Abe, driving and smiling as he looks at the picture of the birthday cake, content in the moment. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.